Hello there, and welcome back to the 9th episode of the Devlog series for SCP The Cycle, the story-based horror game that I'm currently making. This week, I've been making quite some progress, and I've got some things to announce, so let's get started right away. The first addition is the in-game menu that pops up when you press the escape button. Before, when you pressed escape, it would simply close the game, but now it shows you a menu where you have an exit game button and a save button. More on the save and loading system in a bit. I've also implemented a death screen, which ties in nicely to the updates done to SCP-106. Like I said last week, I'd be updating SCP-106 so that you would be able to attack the player. The player can now sustain one hit from SCP-106. A second hit will mean death. This still needs animations and sound effects though. On the death screen, you can exit the game and load your last save point. Now then, onto the main thing that I've been working on this week, the save and load system. Making this was tough for me, and it isn't fully completed yet. I had no idea how I needed to go about this. I knew that GameMaker had built-in save and load functions, but those have one huge drawback. It doesn't allow you to save lists. This meant that when you try to load the game that you have saved, the inventory for the player would be non-existent, and that would result in a crash. The solution for this, INI files. INI files are lightweight text files that GameMaker can use to store data. I'll briefly explain how this system works. When you prompt the game to save, it opens up the savedata.ini file and writes everything that it needs to. When we take a look into this file, you can see that it stores the player position and what room he's in, the state of visual effects such as the fade-in at the start of the game and the alarm, miscellaneous data that has to do with certain scripted dialogue, and lastly several data structures. These here are all lists of data. When you prompt the game to load, it reads the data in this file and replaces the in-game data with this data. The one problem that I'm currently experiencing is the item positions. In the game, you have multiple items lying around, such as keycards. If I were to simply load up the current room, the items would also spawn as they did when you first started the game. This means that you can pick up an item, save and load, and the item would be there again, even though you've already picked it up. Saving the item positions to a list and writing it doesn't seem to work, as the save list is empty every time I tried saving. Currently, I'm trying to store the data to a separate file called objectdata.ini, where the object positions will be stored, but there's still one problem. Currently, I've got 2 keycards lying around in this level, but when I save the game and take a look at the ini file, it will only save one of the 2 items. This saving process for the items is done by a for loop that loops as many times as there are items in a level, so I don't know why it only saves 1 instead of 2 items. I've tried increasing the amount of time that it loops, but this will result in an error where it will say that there are no more items left to be saved. Anyway, I'll get on with that next week. Then, a little bit of optimization. The data structures that SCP-914 uses have now been made temporary instead of permanent. SCP-914 makes use of a list that stores objects in them. These objects are the ones that you put in, and with the help of that list, it calculates the output. Before, this list would exist all the time, where in reality it only had to exist when it had to be used. It was using a processing power, but more importantly, it was difficult in the save and load system, so it now only exists temporarily. Then, as I've also talked about last week, the reduction of annoying and distracting visual effects. Walls and objects no longer become transparent when getting close to them. In theory, this was a good idea, but in practice it proved to be distracting to look at, so it's been removed. Only interactable items such as doors and items will become transparent now. Then, after all these changes, I have a little bit of an announcement to make. It's something that has probably happened to all of us. You set out to make your first game thinking it will be great and just how you imagine it in your head. And as we all know, it almost never lives up to your expectations. That is what I'm experiencing right now. This is my first project, and I had hoped that I would make this game with a long story mode, scary gameplay and much more in mind. I'm realizing more and more now that this will not be the case, and it would be bad for the project to see the game as such. Instead, I'll be focusing on making this a short horror game with a decent enough storyline. It probably wasn't the best idea to make my first project a very story-heavy game, as that requires a lot of scripted actions, whereas a game focused completely around solid gameplay mechanics will probably use way less scripted actions and instead rely on the gameplay that makes the game work. Now then, after that little announcement, as I've talked about last week, I would be assessing what I would need to publish the very first public demo. After looking into it, there are a few things that I need to get right before you'll be able to play the game, and I'll be focusing on that for the next devlog. Firstly, the save and load system needs to work properly. Secondly, music and sound design, mainly sound effects that are missing from the game, such as ambience, damage sounds, etc. Thirdly, the first section of the game, story-wise, needs to be in place. This will be a short tutorial section where you'll learn the basics of the game. Fourthly, tutorial messages that show you how to move, sneak and interact with objects. And lastly, optimization and polishing, where I'll be removing unnecessary code, optimizing the performance of existing code, and improving on the basic UI design that I've got right now. That all will be the point of attention for some time until the demo is ready. And that was it for this week's devlog. As always, I'm very open to suggestions, so do leave some feedback in the comments. If you want to keep up to date with the progress, consider subscribing. Bye for now, and I'll see you all next week.